Hi, subject for this month's gathering is faith. I'm going to break that down into three bits, a bit shorter than last month, and just give you some detail. And then there'll be a follow up email that you can use for meetings in small groups or twos and threes, or however you want to address this. But very hard to um, read the Gospels and not see that there's a direct connection between faith and the activity of God. Let me read to you. I've particularly got Matthew's Gospel here. Matthew 8. When Jesus heard this, he was astonished and said to those following him, I tell you the truth, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. Matthew 9:2. Some men brought to him a paralytic lying on a mat. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, Take heart, son, your sins are forgiven. Matthew 9. Jesus turned and saw her. Take heart, daughter, he said, your faith has healed you. And the woman was healed. Also Matthew 9. Then he touched their eyes and said, According to your faith will it be done to you. Matthew 15. Then Jesus answered, Woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted. And her daughter was healed. Mark 2. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, Son, your sins are forgiven. Mark 5. He said to her, Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering. Negatively, Matthew 8. He replied, You have little faith. Why are you so afraid? Then he got up and rebuked the wind and the waves, and it was completely calm. Matthew 13. And he did not do many miracles there because of their lack of faith. Matthew 14. Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You have little faith, he said. Why did you doubt? Matthew 16:8. Aware of their discussion, Jesus asked, You have little faith. Why are you talking among yourselves about having no bread? Matthew 17. He replied, Because you have so little faith, I tell you the truth. If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, Move from here to there, and it will move. Matthew 21. Jesus replied, To tell you the truth, if you have faith and do not doubt, not only can you do what was done to the fig tree, but also you can say to this mountain, Go throw yourself into the sea, and it will be done. It's very hard to not notice that there does seem to be a genuine relationship between the faith that Jesus sees in people, or senses with people, or sees in a situation, and the release of the power and activity of God. He's able to see that somehow. Other people are able to see it. They don't know what it is. It's very hard to describe it. It's very hard to pretend you've got it. It's very hard to work it up. But whatever it is, when it's present, it can be seen and sensed, and it has effect. Now, I don't think that's meant to make you feel guilty about situations where you've tried to believe for something and it hasn't happened. There's something happens in the mixture of God's presence and of something internal happening in us, or happening in the people we're with, or the situation that we're in, that causes this moment of ignition, that you can imagine happens when certain chemicals are present, that they combust simply because they're there. So there's something about that, and there's something about the fact that this is visible and can be seen, so that Jesus is able to describe it and notice it. I was pondering on some of these and wondering, what is it that Jesus saw? Like when the centurion came to him, why do you say, I haven't seen faith like this in all of Israel? Well, part of it wasn't, I don't think, a particularly spiritual thing. I think maybe what he saw in the centurion was someone who stepped out of the crowd, stepped out of his own culture, because a centurion would have been a Roman soldier, a Gentile, the oppressor, representing the oppressive army and empire, living in this kind of Jewish culture. He wasn't part of it. He wouldn't have been welcome in it. I'm sure he wasn't well thought of. People were probably muttering behind his back, spitting on the ground where he had walked. He stepped out of that culture and stepped into that animosity and stepped towards Jesus. And I think, did Jesus see that as faith? To take that physical step. That's what he did. Wonder, is that how faith is spotted by God? It's not by what he senses inside of us. He sees faith in us by what we do. I read recently of a Christian writer who'd made so much money from his books. He did something very commendable. I'm not criticising it in any way. He's decided that rather than giving 1/10 of his money away, he can give 9/10 of his money away, and now lives happily on 1/10. Unfortunately, he described living on 1/10 of his income, as he is able to live much more comfortably now on 1/10 as a result of his book writing than he was ever able to do before he wrote the books. Now, that seems to me like a wonderful thing and great generosity. But he's now denied the possibility of having to live by faith, which maybe he had to before, or he wasn't quite sure where everything would come from. Now, some of the questions that you get by email are going to challenge a wee bit of our lifestyles about what it might mean to live by faith and to step out against our culture and our background and our logic and see, is there something else we ought to be? Thanks.